Welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. Today's guest is Jeanne Achille from the Devon Group. She's been in the HR tech world for a very long time as one of the best connected and respected people in the industry. She's helped in her career launch and promote thousands of tech brands. She is a real champion of women in tech and a well-known personality in the conference scene. She afforded me loads of time to kind of really drill into the big issues of today in diversity. And, she just had a great insight into how we can fix things moving forward. Today's podcast is brought to you by Brick, a psychometric testing solution that helps eliminate hiring bias. We use it in our business and we do it as part of our search. So it not only helps you predict who's the right hire, eliminates bias, but it also helps predict who's going to do well in the coming months and years. So really great tool. I've been blown away by it, and I got it checked out by loads of other industry experts, and it was the one that came up on top. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and if you know anybody who you think would be great to come on, I'd love to hear it. We've got a few more in the HR tech world before we move on to tech for good in a different vertical, potentially sustainability or clean energy. Lots of interesting topics and CEOs to interview out there. So looking forward to continuing this on. Welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. This is the HR Tech season, and I'm joined today by Jeanne Achille. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I am very well. The UK is starting to open up. For anybody listening, we're at the tail end of the corona pandemic, we hope. How are things faring in your location for that?
You know, I'm in New Jersey, and the US has had, I would say, uneven results in terms of vaccination adoption and also rollout. But here in New Jersey, we've done amazingly well. A significant amount of our population is vaccinated at this point. And people are really excited about the summer months to come. So we're doing well.
Is lovely, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And I am at the top of the Jersey Shore area. So this is our time. Our roads get a little crowded, but it's so enjoyable. So looking forward to it.
Fantastic. And you've had a successful, long, varied, prominent career. Right now,
which I started when I was 7 years old. So let's leave it there.
And you run the Devon Group. What do you guys do?
So the Devon Group is a tech PR agency at its heart. However, given my background, which was in designing HR tech products, we have a specialty in HR tech. We do other tech as well, fintech, retail tech, all of the usual suspects, but we have a very strong HR tech practice. And a lot of the solutions providers in the category, whether they are more service-oriented, like the RPOs, or the product providers, so the ATS vendors, the employee benefits vendors, have come to us over the years to help market their products. So we are traditional PR, but also have a bit of an unusual position given our depth of expertise in the category.
Yeah, that's a lot of depth to be a product manager within a subcategory of, if your primary category. So how does that work? I'm a founder. Which point do I come to you? Do I come to you for marketing and PR, or is there a difference? Are you going to educate me on that as a founder?
Yeah. What a great question. And, you know, a lot of people don't ask that. They think that these things exist in silos, and they don't. I mean, PR and marketing is very much intertwined. And PR as a discipline has evolved tremendously over the years, because now we're looking at digital marketing and social media marketing being part of PR as well. So PR really, when you look at it, has to do with your external communications and how you are building communities, how you are expressing the brand story. So it is rare that a client comes to us and we just talk to them about PR. We look at things in the context of the big picture. One of the challenges, though, is a lot of vendors are doing the exact same thing. And so it's extremely formulaic. There's top of funnel and they have HubSpot, and that's all great. I mean, you should have that. You need to have that level of marketing automation. But where the magic happens is in the relationships and in building the relationships. So a lot of our practice is on connecting people to the right people who are going to help them advance their businesses. And an example of that might be that we would introduce a vendor to maybe an industry analyst or an industry advisor who's involved in vendor selection. And maybe our client, the vendor, gets brought into a big deal. In terms of when people engage with us, oftentimes they do engage with us at startup. Many of our introductions come to us from the venture capital community, where we are asked to get involved to shape what the marketing and PR function looks like for the company. But we also have very large clients, and we have clients that come to us because they're at some point in their journey where a pivot is required. And that might be that they're thinking of positioning for M&A, or they're positioning for an IPO, or there's some sort of growth strategy that necessitates either telling a new story or amplifying their current story. So it's not as straightforward as we always do this. One of the interesting parts of PR is there's a lot of ambiguity in PR, and part of our job is to put structure in place so that we can actually advance initiatives and then measure the effectiveness of those initiatives. So, as I always say, I worked on the corporate side for a number of years. I used to get really bored. Like, I can remember sitting in meetings, like playing with my pen, and I have never gotten bored at Devon. It's not possible to get bored in the PR category. There's always so many interesting things going on out there.
And at which point do you get involved in with the company on the like? Is it normally like they'll have a marketing team involved already, and then you'll come in, or are you getting in at the very start?
What a great question. I think our best relationships are when there is a marketing person on the client side of the business.
Yeah.
It's really difficult when it's, let's say, a leadership team that's at startup, and maybe it's the CEO, CFO, and maybe a head of engineering, but no marketing
Yeah.
expertise. Because it's almost like you're speaking a different language
Yeah.
uh, to those folks. And so they don't always understand what we're off doing and at what point things will kick in. PR is not automated the way your development process is automated. It's not a machine driven science. So I think you're raising a good point, and that is having a marketing person in place, and it can even be a marketing coordinator. So it doesn't need to be someone on the leadership team, but there does need to be someone who can do the basic blocking and tackling so that when opportunities are qualified and presented to the client, that they're able to take advantage of them.
I've never had anybody able to explain the difference between PR and marketing to me before, but I did a postgrad in marketing as well. So,
Did you? Oh
um,
my goodness.
so that was really good. Thank you. Um, one of the many strings to your bow is that you run some conferences. Can you walk me through what that is?
Yeah, so I've been associated with the HR Tech Conference for many years. We do the PR for the conference, and over the years, my role has expanded. I have, for example, chaired the Spring HRTech Conference, which is a virtual iteration of the event. I'm also the chair of Women in HR Tech, which is a summit that we hold at the physical conference held in Las Vegas every fall. We also hold this summit in Singapore at the companion conference there. First of all, it's an honor to chair the conference. I get to be heavily involved in the themes that we cover. In terms of selecting the different speakers, the keynote speakers in particular. And of course, there's a lot of behind the scenes. I always say conferences are like planning a wedding over and over again. It's an immovable object in terms of the dates. And you have to make sure that everything goes smoothly for the attendees. So the conferences are a big part of our platform.
So you hold the keys to the castle.
No, I never like to say that. I do have a boss, so I have to. One thing about owning a PR agency, you have a lot of bosses.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that. I laugh. People are like, "Oh, you're your own boss." I'm like, "No, not really. I report to about 30 clients, and then of course the folks that I report to at the conference as well."
So let's jump into one of those subjects. How do I get a speaking gig at a conference? Like, because
Yeah.
there's there's, al- there's always a little bit of niggliness out there, as we've seen.
Well, it
If you,
depends. It depends on the conference.
yeah,
It does depend on the conference. There's some horse trading that goes on at some conferences
yeah,
where, you might buy a booth or, there's some sort of bartering going on and you get a speaking engagement as a result. Um, so there are what we call sponsored conferences. So there's always something going on behind the scenes in order to earn a speaking engagement, so to speak. Then there's the model that we follow at the HR Tech Conference, and that is truly an earned speaking engagement. So there's a formal call for presentations. It's a form online that you have to complete. You have to also submit some sort of proof of performance or
you have to be
learning objectives.
best mates with Jeanne to get selected.
No, actually not. No, in fact, I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of people for the first time at the conference. So, one thing that's great about my job is I get to talk to a lot of folks.
So
Um,
if I'm applying for that
mhm.
and I'm putting that in online, what type of things can I do to increase my chances that you're going to read it and you're going to be like, oh wow, that's good. That person is going to really set the place alight.
Well, first of all, I read everything. Second of all, I think, well, let me be direct. I wish everyone else read as closely and carefully as I do. So, for example, right now I'm reading through some of our submissions for the fall event, and some of them are excellent, and some of them have absolutely nothing to do with HR technology. So if you submit a speaker proposal and the topic is food or digital signage or something that really isn't going to hit that bullseye in terms of HR technology, well, I put myself in the place of our attendees. They're not going to want to sit through a session on that. I know I don't want to sit through a session on that. I want to attend a conference that adds value because look at their journey. They have to go into their boss and say, hey, I want to go to this conference in Las Vegas. So their boss immediately eye rolls a bit and says, oh, sure you do. And then you have to, of course, pay for your travel and everything that goes along with that. So it has to be valuable. It has to be good use of everyone's time. So we are very careful when we program the HR Technology Conference to make sure we're bringing relevancy to our attendees.
What are the big things that people are going to solve in the next conference?
Yeah. I could have never in a million years, and I think it must feel like I've been in HR tech for a million years, but in a million years, I never could have forecast the year we're coming off of.
Sure.
I talk to so many people who tell me they've never met their boss. They've never met their colleagues. Can you imagine joining a company during a global pandemic, being hired remotely, being onboarded remotely? Your only contact with your colleagues is through Zoom. So I think we have some really big issues that we're going to be tackling
Yeah.
at HR Tech. We're going to be looking at what part of remote hiring and remote onboarding remains in place. It has had its practical applications. So I don't think we go back to the way things were before. And I hate when people say, oh, we're going to go back to normal. There is never normal. Normal does not exist.
It's out of the box, like it's
Exactly. Like, stop like fooling yourself that there's normal out there, because as individual as every organization is, that's how individual the different experiences will be. But I think that's a big thing we're going to tackle. I think we're also going to tackle the reticence of employees going back to physical offices.
Mm.
I think here in the US, we've had a lot of people leave cities, and
Yeah, that's
and
fascinating.
yeah, they're camped out at, out in, some of them are in very rural areas, and they're not interested in going back to a skyscraper in Manhattan. So we have a lot to address.
Are you optimistic about the changes that have happened since COVID?
I'm optimistic by nature.
You are, I can
Sometimes a
tell.
little too Pollyanna-ish. So I have to kind of every once in a while jog myself back into the brutal reality we're dealing with. Um, Here's what I think is problematic, not negative, but problematic. I don't think organizations have really wrapped their arms around the whole human machine interaction
Mm.
that is accelerating as a result of COVID. It was beginning to accelerate before COVID. I think that that's a huge issue for us on the other side of COVID, is that there will be jobs that go away, and it will really happen this time,
Mm.
because of the efficiencies and because of the levels of automation that needed to be put in place.
Will
I
other
also
jobs come around? That's
Well, and that's the good news. There will be other jobs, but I think they're going to be skills driven.
mm.
And I think that, resting on your laurels, like you've had, oh, I've been with this company 10 years and therefore I'm entitled to do this, this, and
Yeah.
this, that's no longer going to be the model that we follow. So skills become the currency of jobs. And so what I find very interesting is that learning, for the first time in a long time, has become more important. So employers that are able to give their employees access to, world-class contemporary learning and development opportunities that help employees develop skills, those are going to be the employers of choice. Because by giving your employees access to more skills development, the employees become more valuable. Whilst the employer would hope that they would stay, they might not. But that's what people are going to be looking for. They're going to be looking for those employers that can really help them develop new skill sets.
Yeah, I wonder, will the dispersion of people from offices lead to more entrepreneurship as well? When people are out on their own and they're kind of like, well, maybe I could just have a crack at this myself.
You make it sound like it's easy. Do you think that people think it's easy?
I think some people do.
Yeah.
I think people can have false optimism and not analyze their own skill sets aggressively enough. Um, eh, I see it. I see it in my world a lot.
Do you?
I
Yeah.
coach. I coach a lot of recruitment firms, early stage, and like they've no plan. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you've just bet the house on this.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's it. And that was so I'm not trying to be difficult, but as an entrepreneur who has run a company for 27 years now,
Yeah.
there is nothing more difficult than doing this. And And I think, there's all those stats about how many startups fail within X period of time in the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, what they don't necessarily capture is how many sleepless nights you have
Yeah.
trying to think through how you're going to make payroll, how you're going to make that next hire who is going to help you attract more business. It's like you're constantly moving
Oh
things
yeah.
around and hoping that the pieces of the puzzle jog into place just for 5 minutes before they shift again.
I quite enjoy that bit of it.
Do you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but my wife's more. I'm in business with my wife, and she's more operationally minded. So,
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh, just when I had it sorted, like
Yeah.
you've gone and you've changed it again." And then my
Yeah.
team, we have a good engine room in the team,
Yeah.
and like they're like, "I can't believe you're trying to do this again." I'm like, "We have to. If you stand still, we're dead." Like,
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and that is the sign of a good entrepreneur is that you never stand still. And I always laugh because I never planned this career path. I never planned to be in business, although early in my career I figured, well, that's where the money is, so I better get over there so I can pay the rent. But I was actually an art major in college.
oh well,
So, I see everything as this opportunity and a big palette with lots of colors, and I'm so I drive the team crazy.
yeah,
And much like the dynamic you've described, I'm not the rows and columns person.
yeah.
And 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 we've learned over the years not to let me touch that part of the business
Yeah.
because it doesn't end well. So it's important also as an entrepreneur to know what your strengths are and have that self-awareness, to stay on the track that's going to have the best outcomes.
Talk to me a little bit about female entrepreneurship in tech. What's it? What's it? What's the challenge? It's a subject close to your heart, I know.
It is. It is. There's a reason I do the Women in HR Tech Summit. When it was presented to me as an opportunity, I was so thrilled because while none of these platforms are perfect, it's so important that we have the conversations. We have to get these conversations going. Um, all of us, all the women I know who have come up through the ranks in tech, have a lot of stories that we could spend our days, telling these horror stories. Also have daughters. I would not want them to go through what I've gone through, but
Yeah.
I suspect they have,
Really,
because
even
because
now.
we yeah because we've just learned to put up with stuff, and that's not the way it should be. We should not be made to feel like we're some sort of oddity or exception. We just want to be part of the team.
Yeah.
We don't want people calling out our gender as a reason to either have us on the team or not have us on the team.
Yeah.
We want to be recognized for our skills and our contributions. And so it does, it still feels odd even after all these years, but I'm very gratified that so many of my colleagues don't back down. There was a time when women would back down and they'd be like, oh, enough. I just,
Not in my
and
house there wasn't.
well, not in mine either. And thank goodness for all of us, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the way you move the needle. So I hope when we talk in another 5 or 10 years that things are much different. I think they're getting there, but there's a lot of underrepresented categories in our workforces,
How,
and it's not
how
just
would you
women.
fix it? Yeah, I'm giving you the Wizard of Oz. You're behind the curtain. You're pulling the levers here. How would you fix women in tech right now? Carte blanche,
Well,
get your palette out there.
it starts with talent acquisition, of course.
Okay.
Because if you're only recruiting who from the university you went to or something like that, if you're not expanding that candidate profile to invite more diverse representation, then the process is broken at the very start. So that's part of the issue. But then once you do hire into the organization, creating an inclusive culture where people feel like they can belong. I'm not saying that has to be like 50 women in the department or something. It's not like that. But like I can tell you, I remember onboarding to a new company once. a publicly held entity, company in the telecommunications industry. And every day there'd be all these guys standing at my doorway in my office every day. And finally, one day I said, okay, this is just weird. Like, why do you do this? And they're like, you wear something different every day. And I thought to myself, what? Well, yeah, I don't wear Dockers. I don't wear, a t-shirt, or I wear a different dress or suit or whatever I was wearing that day. It never occurred to me. But when you make people feel odd, when you make them feel like they don't belong, it's emblematic of deeper culture issues. So there are two pieces. I would say the talent acquisition piece and then the talent retention piece.
What's when you have your female in tech summits, what's the next one about? What are you going to solve?
I'm looking closely at the mass exodus of women from the workforce during COVID and what the path back looks like.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a very valuable talent pool. But the reality is that, when schools went virtual, women left the workforce because it was just impossible to balance, having children being homeschooled and having the demands of a profession. So every time women interrupt their career like that, though, it sets them back. And so I think what we have to look at is, what does the path back into the workplace look like? Perhaps it's a gig model, perhaps it's a flex time model. I mean, I think we're going to wind up looking at different labor models to make sure that we can retain this talent on some level and still grow that talent. Because the reality is, not every school is going to open up 100%. Here in the U.S., we've had a number of childcare, the childcare facilities close, and they're not coming back. They've gone out of business. So we have to look. We still need to do a much better job of how do we blend, family care with professional life. And by the way, I'm not just talking about children. I'm talking about family in general. I mean, because some of us are involved in the other end of the spectrum and dealing with aging parents.
Yeah, interesting. All right, Jeanne. Before we finish up, tell me a little bit about the upcoming conference in Las Vegas.
So we are going to have a physical conference, and we typically have well over 10,000 in attendance at the HRTech conference.
Wow.
Last fall, of course, we did a virtual event. This September 28th through October 1st, we will be in person. We are very optimistic about the population getting vaccinated. I know I was speaking to several CHROs on Friday who are very excited about attending. So this is our path back. Speaking of paths back,
Great.
This is our path back. So we're excited about
10,000.
Well, we'll see if we have 10,000. I would imagine, though, we'll be close to it. You've probably heard Josh Bersin talking about pent-up demand, the pent-up demand that's resulted from the pandemic. I think there's pent-up demand for people to get back into, physical events.
Thanks so much for your time. Really insightful. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.